My name is Adriana, and at 32, I never imagined my successful life as an interior designer in Boston would be turned upside down so completely. For years, I thought the painful estrangement from my family was behind me, that I had built something beautiful from the ashes of that relationship. Then came James, the man I trusted with my heart, and the family reunion that would shatter everything I believed about loyalty and love. What happened next still feels like a nightmare I'm trying to wake up from. Before I share my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and join me on this painful journey of betrayal and unexpected strength. Growing up in a small town outside Chicago wasn't the idyllic childhood most people imagine when they think of suburban America. My parents ruled our household with strict control and impossibly high standards. My father, a banking executive with a reputation for ruthlessness in business that extended to his parenting style, believed in discipline above all else. My mother, always anxious to maintain perfect appearances in our community, supported his decisions without question. Then there was my younger sister, Natalie. From the moment she was born, it was clear she was the golden child. Where I received criticism, she received praise. When I achieved something, it was expected. When she accomplished the same, it was celebrated for weeks. This wasn't subtle, it was blatant favoritism that left emotional scars. I'm still working to heal. By 18, I knew I needed to escape, but college kept me tethered to my parents financially. Those 4 years were a careful balancing act, maintaining enough contact to ensure tuition payments while protecting whatever shreds of self-esteem I had left. I studied interior design, something my father called a hobby career, and my mother insisted was beneath our family's status. But it was my passion, and for once, I refused to let their disapproval dictate my choices. The day after graduation at 22, I packed everything I owned into my used Honda and drove to Boston. I had exactly $3,000 saved, a friend's couch to sleep on, and a determination that burned brighter than any fear. Boston represented everything my hometown wasn't: vibrant, diverse, full of possibilities, and most importantly, hundreds of miles from my family. Those first years were brutally difficult. I worked 3 jobs simultaneously, waitressing mornings, retail evenings, and bartending weekends, while taking any design assistant position I could find, often for free, just to build my portfolio. Sleep became a luxury I rarely afforded myself. But with each small project completed, each client satisfied, I built not just a business, but an identity separate from the one my family had assigned me. Contact with my parents and Natalie dwindled naturally. Holiday calls became shorter, visits non-existent. By year 3 in Boston, conversations happened only on birthdays. By year 5, even those formalities faded. The estrangement wasn't a dramatic declaration. It was a slow, mutual fading away that left a dull ache, but also a profound sense of freedom. 10 years passed this way. By 30, I had transformed from the scared girl fleeing her family into Adriana Reed Designs, a respected name in Boston's interior design community. My small studio apartment had become a stylish condo overlooking the harbor. The secondhand clothes had been replaced with carefully curated pieces that reflected the confident professional I had become. My clients included Boston's elite, and magazines occasionally featured my work. The little girl, desperate for approval, had become a woman who no longer needed it from anyone, especially family. That's when James entered my life at a housewarming party for one of my most prestigious clients. He stood out immediately, not just because of his tall frame and confident smile, but because he seemed genuinely interested in my work, asking thoughtful questions, while others merely complimented the aesthetics, without understanding the intention behind them. "Your use of negative space is intentional, isn't it?" he asked, studying the living room I had designed. "It creates tension, but also possibility. That takes confidence most designers lack." His insight surprised me. Most people at these events talked about color schemes and furniture brands, not the emotional impact of spatial design. When he introduced himself as James Whitman, a financial consultant who had recently relocated from Chicago, I felt that strange mixture of interest and caution that comes from meeting someone who immediately understands parts of you that others miss. I had learned to be careful with relationships. Previous boyfriends had either been intimidated by my independence or tried to control it. James seemed different, appreciative of my success rather than threatened by it. Still, I hesitated when he asked for my number, giving him my business card instead. Professional lines, I explained with a smile. I never mix business with pleasure. Then I'll have to find a way to move this into the pleasure category, he replied with a confidence that should have been arrogant, but somehow wasn't. 3 days later, flowers arrived at my office with a note. No business pretense. Just dinner. Against my better judgment and the warnings from friends who had witnessed my disastrous dating history, I agreed. What followed was a courtship that felt refreshingly mature. James respected my busy schedule, never complained when projects required late nights, and seemed genuinely proud when my business landed a major hotel renovation contract. For the first time, I felt like I was with someone who saw my ambition as an asset rather than a threat. But looking back, I see the warning signs I chose to ignore. The small inconsistencies in his stories, restaurants he claimed to have never visited, despite knowing the menus in detail, people he said he'd just met, but seemed remarkably familiar with. When I questioned these discrepancies, he always had plausible explanations that made me feel paranoid for asking. "You're just so used to people deceiving you that you look for problems where there aren't any," he would say, making me question my own perceptions. By our second anniversary, we had settled into what I believed was a solid relationship. My business was thriving more than ever, with plans to expand to New York City within the year. James supported this idea publicly, but privately began suggesting it might overextend me. "You work yourself too hard already," he would say, massaging my shoulders as I reviewed expansion plans late at night. "New York is cutthroat. Do you really need that kind of stress?" His concern seemed genuine, but now I recognize it for what it was: the first attempt to limit my growing success and independence. The man who had initially been attracted to my ambition was slowly revealing his discomfort with it, a pattern I should have recognized from my childhood, but was too blinded by love to see. The shift in our relationship wasn't dramatic. It happened in such small increments that each individual change seemed insignificant. James began commenting on my work hours, suggesting that normal relationships included more quality time together. When clients would call after hours, his supportive smile became a barely concealed eye roll. "Do they own you?" he asked one evening after I took a call from a panicking client at 10 p.m. "Because sometimes it feels like everyone else gets priority over us." His points weren't entirely unreasonable, which made them harder to dismiss. Work-life balance was something I struggled with, and part of me wondered if his complaints were justified. But the frequency increased, and soon every business dinner became an argument, every weekend consultation a source of tension. Then came the text messages. I wasn't snooping. His phone buzzed repeatedly while he was in the shower, and when I glanced at it to make sure it wasn't an emergency, I saw a string of messages from someone named Mitch, discussing what appeared to be a shared history James had never mentioned. "Still can't believe you're in Boston now," one message read. "Full circle from freshman year, right? Let me know when you're ready to catch up. The old crew misses you." When I casually mentioned these messages over breakfast, asking about his college friends, I hadn't heard about James became instantly defensive. "Why were you going through my phone?" he demanded, his face flushing with anger that seemed disproportionate to my innocent question. "I wasn't going through anything. Your phone kept buzzing, and I thought it might be important," I explained, taken aback by his reaction. He apologized almost immediately, blaming his response on a stressful work situation. "Mitch was just a casual acquaintance from college," he explained. "Not really worth mentioning. Some guys I barely hung out with freshman year before switching dorms." I accepted this explanation, but something felt off. That night, I did something I'm not proud of. I searched for James Whitman in his college's alumni database. What I found confused me further. According to his alumni profile, James had graduated with a degree in communications, not finance, as he had always told me. When confronted, he explained that he had double majored, but found the finance degree more useful professionally, so he tended to emphasize that one. "You're really making a big deal out of nothing," he said with a laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Would you like to see my diplomas? I think they're in storage somewhere." The conversation ended with me feeling foolish for questioning him, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Over the next few weeks, I noticed other inconsistencies, references to childhood experiences that contradicted previous stories. work accomplishments that seemed to shift in importance depending on who he was talking to. When I finally gathered the courage to confront him directly about these discrepancies, the argument lasted for hours. James eventually broke down, admitting he had polished certain aspects of his background when we first met. "I wanted to impress you," he said, eyes downcast in what appeared to be genuine remorse. "You were this successful, confident woman, and I was afraid you wouldn't be interested in someone still figuring things out. The finance background gave me credibility." His vulnerability disarmed me. Hadn't I also presented the most confident version of myself when we met, hiding the insecurities that still plagued me? We spent that night talking about honesty in relationships, making promises to be more authentic with each other moving forward. I believed we had reached a new level of intimacy through this conflict, that our relationship was stronger for having faced this challenge. Just as things were settling back to normal between us, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in years. My mother's voice, artificially bright and strained with forced casualness, filled my ear. "Adriana, darling, it's been too long." The conversation was brief and surreal. After nearly a decade of minimal contact, she called to inform me that Natalie was getting married in 6 weeks. The family, her word choice as though we had remained a cohesive unit all these years, wanted me to attend. Natalie specifically requested my presence. "She always looked up to you," my mother said, rewriting history with such confidence I almost questioned my own memories. It would mean everything to her to have her big sister there on her special day. I promised to think about it, ending the call in a daze of conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to delete the invitation that arrived by email an hour later. Another part wondered if this might be an opportunity for healing, for building an adult relationship with my family separate from the painful dynamics of childhood. When I showed James the invitation, his reaction surprised me. "You should go," he said without hesitation. "Family is everything, Adriana. Whatever happened in the past, they're still your blood." "You don't understand what it was like," I argued. The constant criticism, the comparisons, the feeling that nothing I did would ever be enough. "People change," he countered. "Your parents are older now. Maybe they've gained perspective. And this isn't about them, it's about supporting your sister." His insistence struck me as odd, considering how little interest he had shown in my family history before. But his arguments aligned with my own guilty thoughts. Wasn't I being petty by holding on to childhood grievances? Didn't I owe Natalie at least this one gesture of sisterly support? After days of internal debate, I called my sister directly, our first conversation in years. The awkwardness was palpable, but beneath it I sensed what seemed like genuine desire for reconciliation. "I know things have been complicated," Natalie said, her voice more mature than I remembered. "But I'm getting married, Audrey. I want a fresh start with everyone I love, including you." The childhood nickname broke something inside me. Before I could reconsider, I heard myself accepting the invitation, even agreeing to arrive a week early to participate in pre-wedding events. James immediately offered to accompany me as moral support, rearranging his work schedule without hesitation. "You won't face them alone," he promised, squeezing my hand. "We're a team." I couldn't have imagined then how those words would come to haunt me, or how completely the team had already been compromised. The drive from Boston to my hometown outside Chicago took 14 hours, but it felt like traveling through time rather than merely distance. With each passing mile, I could feel myself regressing, the confident business owner giving way to the insecure daughter desperate for approval. James noticed my growing tension, placing his hand reassuringly on my knee as I gripped the steering wheel. "They can't hurt you anymore," he reminded me. "You're not that little girl. You're a successful woman they should be proud of." His words were meant to comfort, but they increased my anxiety. What if they still weren't proud? What if nothing I had accomplished mattered to them? The thought made my stomach knot painfully. We arrived at my parents' Tudor-style home, a house that had always felt more like a museum than a home on Sunday afternoon. My mother opened the door before we could ring the bell, her practiced smile firmly in place. She had aged fine lines framing her eyes and mouth, but her posture remained rigidly perfect, her clothing expensively understated. "Adriana," she said, her voice warm, but her eyes assessing every detail of my appearance. "You look well. A bit thin, perhaps, But that's fashionable these days, isn't it? Just like that, the familiar criticism wrapped in a compliment, the first of what would undoubtedly be many. I forced a smile and introduced James, who immediately charmed her with compliments about the house and her appearance. My father appeared moments later, offering a stiff handshake instead of a hug, his eyes cold despite his polite words of welcome. James Whitman, my father said, studying him with interest. Any relation to the Whitmans of Lake Forest? Distant cousins, I believe, James replied smoothly, though I haven't kept in touch with that branch of the family. I glanced at him in surprise. He had never mentioned any family connections in Chicago, distant or otherwise. Before I could question this, Natalie burst into the foyer looking radiant in her pre-wedding glow. She threw her arms around me in a hug that felt genuinely affectionate, momentarily dissolving my defenses. "You came," she whispered. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wouldn't miss your wedding," I replied, finding I meant it despite our complicated history. The initial awkwardness gave way to a busy evening of introductions, as Natalie's fiancé Michael arrived with his parents and sister for dinner. Michael was handsome in a conventional way, with the confident demeanor of someone accustomed to success. When he and James were introduced, I noticed a flicker of something pass between them, recognition quickly masked by formal pleasantries. "Have you two met before?" I asked, looking between them. "I don't believe so," Michael answered smoothly. "Though James has one of those familiar faces, doesn't he?" James laughed agreeably. "I get that a lot. Must have a common face type." Throughout dinner, I noticed how effortlessly James integrated himself into my family's dynamic, discussing financial markets with my father, complimenting my mother's decor choices, asking Michael thoughtful questions about his law practice. It was as though he had rehearsed for this moment, knowing exactly which topics would ingratiate him with each person. More disturbing was how quickly my parents embraced him while maintaining their emotional distance from me. Every accomplishment I mentioned was met with polite disinterest, while James received enthusiastic attention for even his most mundane observations. "Interior design is having quite a moment, isn't it?" my mother remarked when I mentioned my upcoming New York expansion. "Though I imagine it's quite competitive. Not everyone succeeds in such a saturated market." "Adriana is being modest," James interjected before I could respond. "Her business is remarkably successful, though I keep telling her New York might be overextending at this stage." My father nodded approvingly at James. "Wise perspective. Overexpansion kills more businesses than competition." The subtle undermining continued throughout the week. At the bridal luncheon, my mother introduced me to her friends as Natalie's sister who does decorating in Boston, reducing years of hard work to a casual hobby. When I corrected her explaining the scope of my business, she smiled tightly. "Adriana always had such grand ambitions," she told her friends. "Unlike Natalie, who understood the importance of balance, such a blessing to see her marrying well and planning for a family instead of being consumed by career." James, meanwhile, began disappearing for hours at a time, claiming work emergencies or conference calls. When he returned, he would often be in deep conversation with my father or Michael, conversations that abruptly changed direction when I approached. "Just boring guy talk," James would explain with a dismissive wave. "Nothing you'd find interesting, trust me." 3 days before the wedding, I returned to our hotel room earlier than expected after a bridal fitting was canceled. Outside the door, I heard James on the phone, his voice uncharacteristically stern. "We agreed this was the best approach," he was saying. "She responds better to gradual pressure than confrontation. Trust me, I know how to handle her." When I entered, he quickly ended the call, claiming it was a difficult client. That night, I woke to find him missing from our bed at 3 a.m. His wallet had fallen from his pants pocket, and against my better judgment, I looked inside, finding receipts for restaurants in my hometown from dates when he claimed to be traveling for work. My suspicions now fully aroused, I confronted him when he returned, demanding to know who he had been meeting in my hometown before our arrival. His explanation that he had made an advance trip to discuss a surprise for me with my parents seemed plausible, but felt wrong somehow. Why keep such a trip secret? And why would he collaborate with parents I had been estranged from for years? The next morning, I overheard James and Michael in whispered conversation on the patio. James saying, "She's getting suspicious. We need to accelerate the timeline." Michael's response chilled me. My sister thought the same thing. Just stick to the plan. It's working. When I casually mentioned this exchange to James, he laughed it off as wedding stress discussions. Michael's getting cold feet. I was just giving him some advice. That afternoon, I found myself alone with Michael's sister Amanda, who had been watching me with something like sympathy throughout the week. After several glasses of wine at the rehearsal dinner, she leaned close to me. "You should ask more questions about how Michael and James really know each other," she whispered. "Brothers stick together even when they shouldn't." Before I could press her for details, she was called away to help with seating arrangements, but her words lingered a warning I couldn't ignore. That night, while James slept, I did something I had never imagined myself doing. I accessed his laptop using the password I had seen him enter countless times. What I found would forever change my understanding of trust, family, and betrayal. The email account was hidden within a folder labeled Tax Documents 2017, not somewhere anyone would casually browse. It opened to reveal hundreds of exchanges between James and my family, dating back 14 months long before my mother's phone call about the wedding. My hands trembled as I clicked on the earliest email from my father to James, Mr. Whitman. "Thank you for reaching out regarding Adriana. As discussed in our call, we share your concerns about her estrangement from family values. Your proposal is intriguing. Let's arrange a meeting to discuss further steps and potential arrangements. Harold Reed." Meeting arrangements. The clinical tone made my stomach turn. I clicked through more emails, each more devastating than the last. James had initiated contact with my parents after learning about my family background from casual conversations where I had shared painful memories. Rather than offering support, he had seen an opportunity. The correspondence revealed a calculated plan. James would gradually influence me toward reconciliation while reporting back on my business finances and personal life. My parents, concerned that my growing success might permanently remove me from their sphere of influence, had agreed to his proposal, even offering financial incentives tied to specific outcomes. Attached is the first installment as agreed. Read an email from 6 months ago. We're pleased with the progress regarding the wedding attendance. The New York expansion remains a concern. Please focus efforts there as discussed. Emails between James and Michael revealed another layer of deception. They weren't strangers, but former college roommates who had remained close friends. Michael had introduced James to my parents after learning about me through Natalie. The entire relationship had been orchestrated from the beginning. Most painful were the messages where James criticized me to my family. Adriana remains stubborn about certain issues. Her independence is admirable, but often manifests as disregard for others' feelings. I'm working on helping her see how this self-centered approach affects relationships. Self-centered. The word my father had used throughout my childhood whenever I expressed personal desires or boundaries. James had adopted their language, their perspective on me becoming their ally against the woman he claimed to love. I was still reading, tears streaming down my face, when James stirred and noticed the blue light of the laptop screen. He was beside me in seconds, his face transforming from confusion to anger as he registered what I was viewing. "You had no right," he said, voice low and dangerous. "Those are private communications." "Private communications about me?" I countered, my voice surprisingly steady, despite the hurricane of emotions inside. "Communications with my family behind my back for over a year. Was any of it real, James? Any part of our relationship?" "Don't be dramatic," he said, attempting to take the laptop, which I clutched tighter. "Yes, I contacted your parents, but with good intentions. You were clearly suffering from the estrangement, whether you admitted it or not." "Good intentions?" I echoed in disbelief. "You've been accepting money from them to manipulate me. You've been reporting on my private life, criticizing me to them, undermining my business decisions." "They're your parents," he insisted, as though this justified everything. "They love you and want what's best for you. Sometimes that means intervention when someone can't see what they're doing to themselves." "What exactly am I doing to myself?" I demanded. "Building a successful business, living independently, making my own choices." James ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "You're isolating yourself from the people who care about you. You're so caught up in proving yourself that you can't see how it affects others. Your parents just want you to have balanced family relationships, not just work. My parents want control, I corrected him. And apparently so do you. Was that the arrangement, James? Help them rein me in and what? Get their approval. Financial support. His expression confirmed what the emails had suggested. It wasn't like that initially, he claimed. I genuinely care about you, Adriana. But your family helped me see patterns you can't recognize in yourself. You're difficult, defensive workaholic, unwilling to compromise. They understand because they've known you longer. Each word felt like a physical blow. The man I had trusted most in the world was gazing at me with a mixture of condescension and frustration that mirrored my father's expression perfectly. If I'm so difficult, why stay? I asked quietly. Why not find someone easier to love? His answer revealed everything. Because beneath all that you have potential. Your business connections, your talent with the right guidance, you could really be something. Your parents see that too. Not because he loved me. Because I was an investment, a project with potential returns. The realization was both devastating and strangely liberating. The fog of confusion lifted, revealing the truth I had been avoiding for months. I'm leaving, I said, closing the laptop and reaching for my suitcase. Tonight. James's demeanor changed instantly, panic replacing condescension. Don't be irrational. It's the middle of the night. Where will you go? Away from you, away from all of you. As I packed my essentials, James alternated between apologies and threats. Think about what this will do to your relationship with your family, he warned. They've finally welcomed you back and you're throwing it away over some emails. When that didn't work, he escalated. What about your clients? I've met most of them now. One word about your instability, your inability to follow through on commitments, and your reputation will be damaged beyond repair. I paused, the threat hitting its mark. My business was everything to me, the product of years of sacrifice and hard work. But looking at James, I realized staying would cost something even more valuable, my self-respect. Do your worst, I said, zipping the suitcase closed. I survived without my family's approval for a decade. I'll survive without yours too. As I headed for the door, James made one final plea. At least talk to your parents before you go. They deserve an explanation. It was manipulative, but he was right about one thing: my parents deserved to hear directly from me. Not because I owed them consideration, but because I needed to end this chapter definitively. No more slow fading, no more ambiguity. A clean, clear break. I'll talk to them, I agreed. But not because you think I should, because I need to. With that, I walked out of the hotel room and drove through the darkness toward the house where my childhood dreams had been systematically dismantled, ready to confront the architects of both past and present betrayals. The porch light was on when I arrived at my parents' house just after midnight. Either they were still awake, or they left it burning all night, a pretense of welcome that never extended beyond illumination. I rang the doorbell, hearing it echo through the house with the same ominous tone I remembered from childhood returns after curfew violations. My father answered, still fully dressed, despite the hour, his face registering surprise, quickly masked by disapproval. Adriana, it's past midnight. What could possibly warrant this disruption? No greeting, no concern about why his daughter might appear unannounced in the middle of the night, clearly distraught. Just irritation at the inconvenience. I need to speak with you and Mom, I said, walking past him without waiting for an invitation. And Natalie, if she's here. Natalie is staying at Michael's parents' house, he replied, following me into the living room where my mother appeared in a silk robe, her face carefully arranged into concerned parenthood for an audience that no longer included just family. Darling, what's wrong? Where's James? She asked, her eyes darting to the door as though expecting him to materialize. James won't be joining us, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. That's part of what we need to discuss. My father sighed dramatically. I'll call Natalie. She should hear whatever this is directly, rather than getting a distorted version later. While he made the call, my mother offered tea, always her solution to emotional situations, as though proper British brewing techniques could dilute life's messiest moments into manageable social occasions. I don't want tea, I said. I want answers. About what exactly? She asked, perching on the edge of the sofa, maintaining perfect posture even in crisis. About why you and Dad thought it appropriate to recruit my boyfriend as an informant. About why you offered him money to manipulate me. About why, after 10 years of barely acknowledging my existence, you suddenly decided my life required your intervention. Her face paled slightly, but she maintained composure. I see James has shared some private discussions. How disappointing. We merely offered guidance to someone who cares about your well-being. Guidance, is that what you call paying someone to report on my personal life and business decisions to undermine my confidence and independence? My father returned before she could respond. Natalie and Michael will be here shortly. I suggest we wait to have this conversation with everyone present. Why? I challenged. So you can present a united front, so you can make me the unreasonable one again. So that we can address this as a family. He countered his tone, suggesting I was being childish. Something you've consistently avoided. 20 minutes of tense silence later, Natalie arrived with Michael in tow, both looking rumpled from sleep, but alert with anticipation. Natalie rushed to hug me, but I stepped back, maintaining physical and emotional distance. What's going on? She asked, glancing between our parents and me. Dad said it was an emergency. I discovered some interesting emails tonight. I began, looking directly at Michael. Emails revealing that my boyfriend James, who I met coincidentally at a client's party, was actually a plant. Your fiancé's former roommate recruited to infiltrate my life and report back to our parents. Michael's expression confirmed everything before he could formulate a denial. Natalie turned to him, confusion evident. Michael, what is she talking about? It wasn't like that, he protested weakly. James and I knew each other from college, yes, but you deliberately concealed that connection, I interrupted. Just like James deliberately pursued me after learning about my family situation. Just like our parents deliberately offered financial incentives for him to steer me toward their preferred life choices. I turned to Natalie, whose shocked expression suggested she might not have known the full extent of the scheme. Did you know, were you part of this from the beginning, or were you brought in later? Her hesitation told me everything. Not from the beginning, she admitted quietly. But yes, I knew James wasn't just randomly dating you. The confirmation hurt more than I expected. Despite our complicated relationship, some childish part of me had hoped Natalie might have remained untouched by our parents' manipulations, might have developed her own moral compass. Why? I asked, addressing the room collectively. Why go to such elaborate lengths to reinsert yourselves into my life? My father, ever the strategist, decided the time for denials had passed. Your business has become remarkably successful, he stated matter-of-factly. Financial publications have taken notice. Industry awards, features in design magazines. Your estrangement was acceptable when you were struggling, but now I'm worth claiming. I finished for him. Now my success might benefit the family reputation. Don't be crude, my mother interjected. We've always wanted a relationship with you. You're the one who cut us off. After years of criticism and comparison, I reminded her. After making it abundantly clear that nothing I did would ever meet your standards. Parenting isn't about blind praise, my father said dismissively. We pushed you because we saw potential. Your problem has always been your inability to accept guidance from those with more experience. My problem, I countered, has been allowing people like you to define my worth, something I won't do anymore. The front door opened then, and James walked in without knocking, exchanging a glance with my father that confirmed their alliance. His presence completed the tableau of betrayal, every person in the room connected by secrets and schemes centered around controlling me. Adriana, you're upset, I understand, James began in the soothing tone he used when he thought I was being unreasonable. But running away doesn't solve anything. Let's discuss this rationally. There's nothing to discuss, I replied. I know everything. The plan, the payments, the constant updates on my life and business. It's over. You're overreacting, my father said. James has been a positive influence. Your business is thriving. You're reconnecting with family. These are good developments. Developments orchestrated through lies and manipulation. I pointed out. None of it was genuine. None of it was about what I wanted or needed. And what exactly do you want? My mother asked, her tone suggesting no answer would satisfy her. To be alone. To work yourself into exhaustion with no family to support you. I want authenticity, I answered simply. Relationships based on mutual respect, not control. Love that doesn't come with conditions. Such naivety, my father scoffed. All relationships involve influence and compromise. James understands that even if you don't. James moved to stand beside my parents, a visual representation of the sides that had formed. Natalie hesitated momentarily before joining them, completing the tableau. 5 against 1, just as it had always been in our family dynamics. We've invested considerable resources in helping you correct your course, my father continued. Your business success is commendable, but without family, what does it really amount to? Who will care about your achievements if you've alienated everyone who matters? The familiar tactics, guilt, obligation, isolation washed over me. But this time something was different. I could see the manipulation, clearly recognizing it not as truth, but as a weapon designed to maintain control. I think you have it backwards, I said quietly. The question isn't who will care about my achievements if I alienate you. It's who will care about me if I allow people who have repeatedly betrayed my trust to remain in my life. Dramatic as always, my mother sighed. No one has betrayed you. We've tried to help you overcome your self-destructive tendencies. By hiring my boyfriend to spy on me, I asked incredulously. By orchestrating an entire relationship as a means of manipulation. That's not help, that's abuse. The word hung in the air, uncomfortable and undeniable. My father's face hardened. If you insist on framing our concern this way, perhaps we have reached an impasse, he said coldly. You have a choice to make, Adriana. Accept that your family and James have your best interests at heart, or continue this self-indulgent rebellion and face the consequences. Consequences, I repeated. Like what? More estrangement? That seems like a blessing at this point. Your reputation in the design community is built partly on connections, James interjected smoothly. Connections that could easily be damaged by certain information about your reliability, your mental stability. The threat was unmistakable. They would attempt to destroy what I had built if I didn't comply with their vision for my life. A decade ago, such a threat might have terrified me into submission. Now it only confirmed I was making the right choice. I built my reputation on talent and hard work, I said, meeting his gaze steadily. Not connections, not family name. If my work can't stand on its own merits, then perhaps it shouldn't stand at all. You're making a mistake, Natalie said, speaking up for the first time in several minutes. Family is forever, Adriana. Businesses fail, relationships end, but blood remains. Blood isn't always thicker than water, I replied. Sometimes it's just more toxic. I looked around the room at these people who claimed to love me while systematically undermining my autonomy. My father with his cold calculations, my mother with her superficial concerns, my sister with her conditional loyalty, James with his practiced deceptions, and Michael with his silent complicity. I came here tonight for closure, I said, gathering my purse. And I've gotten it. I won't be attending the wedding, Natalie. I won't be in contact with any of you moving forward. Whatever scheme you've developed ends now. You'll regret this decision, my father warned. Perhaps not immediately, but eventually, when you have no one to turn to. I smiled then genuinely. That's where you're wrong. I've spent 10 years building a life full of people who value me exactly as I am. The only thing I regret is allowing the possibility of your approval to cloud my judgment even for a moment. As I walked toward the door, James made one final attempt. Adriana, please. We can work through this. What we have is worth saving. I turned to face him one last time. What we had was never real. It was a transaction, one that's now complete. With those words, I walked out of my childhood home for what I knew would be the last time, leaving behind not just my biological family, but the weight of their expectations and disappointments. The night air felt cleansing, and despite the pain and betrayal still raw in my chest, Each breath came easier than the last as I drove away from the past and toward whatever uncertain future awaited me. The drive back to Boston became a 13-hour meditation on betrayal and survival. I stopped only for gas and coffee, needing the physical distance from Chicago as desperately as the emotional separation from what had transpired there. Rain accompanied me through Indiana and Ohio, matching my tears, until somewhere in Pennsylvania, both the skies and my eyes cleared. By the time I reached my condo, exhaustion had replaced the initial shock and anger. All I wanted was a shower and my own bed's small comforts that now represented safety in a world that had proven far more treacherous than I'd imagined. But even that simple solace was denied me. The moment I unlocked my door, I knew something was wrong. The air felt disturbed, as though someone had recently been there despite my 2-week absence. Nothing was visibly out of place, but the sensation persisted as I moved cautiously through the rooms, checking closets and behind doors with the hypervigilance of someone whose trust had been fundamentally violated. In my home office, I found the source of my unease. My computer was running despite having been shut down before our trip. The screensaver swirled hypnotically, hiding whatever might be displayed beneath. With trembling fingers, I moved the mouse, revealing my email program open to my business account, dozens of messages marked as read that I had never seen. James had remote access to my computer, a feature we had set up for convenience when traveling, now weaponized against me. A cold fear replaced exhaustion as I realized the potential damage he could have done. I immediately called Tara, my assistant of 3 years and the only person besides me with comprehensive knowledge of my business operations. Adriana. Her voice was thick with sleep. It was barely 5 a.m. Are you okay? I thought you weren't back until tomorrow. I need you to come to the office immediately, I said, already shutting down the compromised computer. We have a situation. To her credit, Tara asked no further questions, simply promising to be there within the hour. While waiting, I used my phone to change every password I could think of: email, banking, social media, client portals. Then I systematically disconnected all devices from my home network and reset the router to factory settings. Tara arrived with coffee and concern, listening without interruption as I explained the entire situation. James, my family, the betrayal, and my fears about what might have been done in my absence. That manipulative bastard, she said when I finished, her usual professional demeanor momentarily abandoned. What do you need me to do? Check client communications, I instructed. See if any messages have been sent from my accounts that I didn't write. Contact everyone on our current project list and confirm all recent instructions actually came from me. While Tara made calls from her cell phone, I used her laptop to access our cloud backup system, confirming that our design files remained unaltered. The relief was short-lived. Tara's expression grew increasingly grim as she worked through our client list. Walter's development is concerned, she reported. They received an email supposedly from you 3 days ago expressing doubts about meeting their timeline and suggesting they might want to consider other options for the hotel lobby redesign. The Walters contract, our largest to date and the cornerstone of our planned expansion. A $500,000 project that would have established us firmly in the luxury hotel market. What else? I asked, bracing myself. The Richardson renovation received a message saying we needed to double our fee estimate due to unforeseen complications. They're understandably upset. One by one, Tara revealed similar communications to nearly every major client, emails strategically designed to damage relationships and credibility without being obviously fraudulent. Some suggested unexpected delays, others quality concerns, still others personality conflicts with key stakeholders. All bore just enough specificity to seem legitimate, all sent within the past 48 hours. He's trying to destroy everything I've built, I whispered, the magnitude of the betrayal still expanding. This isn't just about control anymore. This is punishment. My phone vibrated with incoming texts, James alternating between apologies and warnings that this was just the beginning if I didn't come to my senses. My parents expressing their disappointment in my continued immaturity. Natalie suggesting I seek professional help for my paranoia and inability to accept love. I blocked each number methodically, then turned to Tara, who was watching me with a mixture of concern and determination. "What do we do?" she asked simply. The question anchored me, pulling me back from the edge of despair. What would we do? Not just what would I do. For the first time since discovering James's betrayal, I remembered I wasn't actually alone. I had built not just a business, but a network of relationships based on genuine mutual respect. First, damage control, I decided. I need to personally contact every client who received fraudulent communications. Not by email, they need to hear my voice, see my face if possible. I'll set up the meetings. Tara nodded. What about legal action? These are criminal acts: identity theft, fraud, possibly extortion. She was right, of course. What James and my family had done crossed numerous legal boundaries. I contacted Marcus Rivera, a client who had become a friend and happened to be one of Boston's most respected attorneys. Despite the early hour, he answered on the third ring. "Adriana, everything okay?" "No," I admitted, "but I'm hoping you can help with that." Marcus listened as I outlined the situation, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly allowing me to speak uninterrupted. When I finished, his response was immediate and unequivocal. "This is actionable on multiple fronts," he confirmed. "I can have cease and desist letters drafted today and restraining orders filed by this afternoon. As for the business interference, we're looking at potential civil and criminal charges." The legal terminology should have been comforting systemic problems with systemic solutions. But something in me resisted. The thought of protracted legal battles, of having to repeatedly detail and relive this betrayal in sterile courtrooms, felt like another form of victimization. "Let's start with the restraining orders and cease and desist," I decided. "I need protection and distance more than I need vengeance." Over the next 72 hours, sleep became a luxury as Tara and I worked relentlessly to salvage client relationships. Most were understanding once the situation was explained, though the Walters contract remained precarious. My home and office systems were professionally scrubbed and secured, passwords changed, new protocols established. Still, the emotional toll mounted. Each night alone in my condo brought fresh waves of doubt and self-recrimination. How had I missed the signs? Was I truly so desperate for connection that I had overlooked such fundamental deceptions? The questions circled relentlessly, preventing rest and recovery. On the fourth day, when exhaustion had rendered me nearly non-functional, Tara made an executive decision. "You have an appointment at 3 o'clock, she announced, placing a business card on my desk. "Dr. Eleanor Patel, specializes in trauma and relational abuse." "I don't need therapy," I protested weakly. "I need more hours in the day." "You need someone who understands what you're going through," Tara countered. "Someone who can help you process this so you can actually function again. I'm not asking, I'm telling, as your assistant who wants to keep her job and as your friend who cares about your well-being." That afternoon, sitting in Dr. Patel's warmly lit office, the carefully constructed facade I had maintained finally crumbled. I wept for the relationship I thought I had, for the family reconciliation I had briefly hoped for the sense of security that had been shattered. "What you're experiencing is a form of complex grief," Dr. Patel explained gently. "You're mourning not just the relationship with James, but the family connections you hoped might still be salvageable. Additionally, you're processing a profound betrayal of trust that has implications for how you view all your relationships." "I keep thinking I should have known," I admitted. "There were signs." "That's a common response," she nodded. "But it's important to remember that manipulative people deliberately exploit our human capacity for trust and our desire for connection. Your openness to love isn't a weakness, Adriana. It's one of your strengths, even if it was misused in this case." Weekly sessions with Dr. Patel became anchoring points as I navigated the aftermath. Through her recommendation, I also joined a support group for adult survivors of family emotional abuse, meeting others who understood the complex pain of toxic family systems. The Walters contract was eventually salvaged, though, at the cost of a significantly reduced fee. Other clients remained loyal, some even referring new business as a show of support. The New York expansion was postponed, but not abandoned, a strategic retreat rather than a surrender. One unexpected ally emerged from the wreckage. Michael's sister Amanda contacted me through a carefully anonymous email expressing her disgust at what had transpired. "I tried to warn you," she wrote, "but I was too cryptic, too afraid of the backlash from my own family. Michael and Natalie's marriage is already showing cracks. The foundation was rot from the beginning. I'm sorry for my part in all this, even if it was just silence when I should have spoken plainly." Her honesty was refreshing amidst the gaslighting and manipulation that had characterized my family's responses to my departure. We began a cautious correspondence that eventually developed into genuine friendship, two women who understood the courage required to question family narratives. 3 months after the wedding I didn't attend, I moved to a new apartment in a secure building with no connection to my previous address. The space was smaller, but felt infinitely safer, a sanctuary I designed to reflect healing rather than achievement. Soft textures replaced sharp edges, warm colors invited calm, and furniture, arranged in conversation groups, welcomed the genuine connections I was slowly rebuilding. As summer turned to fall, the legal notices and threatening messages from James and my family gradually subsided. Whether due to Marcus's aggressive legal response or simply their recognition that I would not be manipulated back into their orbit, the direct attacks ceased. The silence was its own form of healing. 6 months later, on a crisp October morning, I stood in the newly completed offices of Adriana Reed Designs in downtown Boston. The space embodied everything I had learned through the ordeal: beauty emerging from authenticity, strength from vulnerability, success from genuine collaboration rather than manipulation. The New York expansion was back on track with a small satellite office scheduled to open after the new year. The Walters project had been completed to universal acclaim, featured in 2 design magazines and generating inquiries from luxury hotel groups across the country. My business hadn't just survived the attack, it had emerged stronger, more focused, more authentically aligned with my values. But the professional recovery, while gratifying, was secondary to the personal transformation. Through therapy and the support group I had finally identified and begun dismantling the deeply ingrained patterns from my childhood, the reflexive need for approval, the tendency to doubt my own perceptions when challenged by authority figures, the belief that love required performance and perfection. "The thing about narcissistic family systems," Dr. Patel had explained in one breakthrough session, "is that they condition you to believe your worth is contingent on utility. What you provide, not who you are." That frame helped me understand why James had been such an effective weapon against me. He had recognized and exploited the very wounds my family had created: my hunger for validation, my fear of abandonment, my struggle to trust my own judgment when someone claimed to know better. Through Amanda, I occasionally heard news of my family. Natalie's marriage was indeed troubled, with Michael already involved in an affair barely 4 months after their wedding. My parents had apparently taken his side, viewing Natalie as failing to maintain his interest, the same criticism they had directed at me throughout my dating life. James had attempted a similar manipulation with another successful woman, but Amanda reported that when confronted with evidence of his deception, he had quickly abandoned the strategy and moved to Chicago, where my father had arranged a position at his firm. The knowledge that they continued their alliance didn't surprise me, though it once would have devastated me. "Difficult people find each other," my therapist observed when I shared this information. "They validate each other's distorted worldviews." My parents attempted contact once more, sending a formal letter expressing their willingness to reconcile if I could acknowledge my part in the misunderstanding. The language was so perfectly calibrated to trigger guilt and self-doubt that it might once have succeeded. Instead, I recognized it as the manipulation it was and filed the letter away as evidence should their harassment resume. The most profound healing came through the authentic connections I cultivated in the aftermath. Tara had evolved from assistant to trusted friend and business partner, her loyalty during the crisis earning her an equity stake in the company's future. The support group introduced me to others who understood the particular pain of family betrayal, creating bonds based on genuine empathy rather than obligation. Most significantly, I developed a new understanding of what constitutes family. Blood relation, I realized, was perhaps the least important factor in determining who deserved access to my life and heart. The people who stood by me during my darkest moments, who offered support without condition, who respected my autonomy while providing connection, these were my true family, chosen deliberately rather than assigned by biology. This revelation inspired me to create a mentorship program for young women in design, especially those from challenging family backgrounds. Foundations by Design provided not just professional guidance, but emotional support and community for those navigating career development without family resources or encouragement. One evening, as I reviewed applications for the program's second cohort, I came across a familiar name, a young designer whose portfolio showed remarkable promise despite limited formal training. The biographical information revealed she had been estranged from her family since college, working multiple jobs to fund her education while building an impressive body of work. Her story resonated so deeply with my own that I felt an immediate connection. Here was another woman determined to create beauty despite, or perhaps because of the pain she had experienced. Another soul refusing to be defined by those who had failed to see her worth. I approved her application personally, adding a note: "Your ability to create harmony from discord speaks to strengths that transcend technique. We recognize not just your talent, but your resilience." As I sent the acceptance email, I reflected on the strange alchemy of trauma transformed into purpose. The very experiences designed to diminish me had ultimately expanded my capacity for empathy, my appreciation for authentic connection, my commitment to creating spaces, both physical and emotional, where others could feel valued and secure. The betrayal by my family and James had been devastating, yes. But it had also been clarifying, burning away illusions and leaving behind something more genuine than I had ever experienced. The pain had forced me to articulate and defend my boundaries, to distinguish between love and control, to recognize my own worth independent of others' validation. In the end, what they intended as punishment became liberation. By trying to force me back into the constraints of their expectations, they inadvertently freed me from the last vestiges of those constraints within my own mind. Their betrayal, meant to diminish me, had instead revealed a strength I hadn't known I possessed. I turned off my computer and moved to the window, watching twilight settle over Boston Harbor. The lights of the city gradually illuminated against the darkening sky, each one representing someone navigating their own complex journey of connection and identity. Some were surely entangled in the toxic dynamics I had escaped, others fortunate enough to be surrounded by genuine love and support. For all of them, for all of us, I wished the clarity to distinguish between the two and the courage to choose authentic connection over comfortable illusion. Because that I had learned is the true measure of wealth in this life, not success or status or even family name, but the quality of the bonds we forge with those who see and celebrate our authentic selves. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between toxic family relationships and your own well-being? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember that sharing your experience might help someone else find the courage to set healthy boundaries. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories of healing and growth. Thank you for listening to my journey. May your own path lead to people who truly value you for exactly who you are.